The new school year is in full swing, from navigating through a global pandemic and mental health issues to debates over safety and use of technology in the classroom. Southern California students are dealing with matters unlike ever before. And tonight, we're diving into these issues with some of the region's top educators. And the first of our Back to School Town Hall series, we're zeroing in on Los Angeles County. And welcome to our Back to School Night Town Hall special here on CBS News Los Angeles. I'm Pat Harvey. LA County is home to 80 public school districts serving 1.3 million elementary students through high school. And tonight, 4 of those district leaders are here with us. LAUSD Superintendent Alberto Carvalho, who has been leading the nation's second largest school district since 2022. LAUSD is home to more than 500,000 students. And next is Inglewood USD County Administrator James Morris, on the job since 2023. And here's a fun fact. In his 44 years as an educator, he has never missed a day. Perfect attendance. And Pasadena USD Superintendent Elizabeth Blanco. She was serving as interim superintendent before her official appointment this spring, and she's been with the district for more than 10 years. And William S. Hart Union High School District Superintendent Michael Vieira. He served districts in the Antelope Valley before joining the Hart District in 2013. I want to thank you all for being with us this evening. And before we start, I want to give each of you a chance to tell us your top goals or priorities for the new school year. And we're going to begin with you, since you're right next to me, Superintendent Carvalho.
Well, let me begin by thanking you, Pat, for this first ever opportunity to really have a conversation with my colleagues and discuss the issues that impact our communities. The priorities for us are well known to all of us. Number one, fully recover from the pandemic effects on academic regression, stabilize the mental well-being, social and emotional well-being of our students, but also our workforce, decipher through and stabilize the finances, considering the fact that California has entered a really difficult era of financial restraint based on less revenues than they were anticipated. And lastly, navigating a very politically toxic national environment that ostracizes, criticizes the immigrant, the gay, the one of color, the poor, threatens to shut down the Department of Education with significant financial implications for kids across the country.
All right, we knew you were going to bring it up. We didn't want to get too political, but that is the truth. We do have a candidate who is threatening to shut down the Department of Education. Mr. Morris, please.
Sure, Pat. Adding to what Superintendent Carvalho said, because I think those priorities are pretty similar for all of us, right? Good instruction for students, wellness, and having good financial systems and protecting education. I think those are priorities for all of us. In Inglewood specifically, we're implementing several new programs specifically designed to improve academic achievement, and that's what we're probably most excited about this year.
Okay, we're going to be getting into more on these issues, but again, Ms. Blanco, we're going to give you a chance to respond.
Yeah, so in addition to what my colleagues have already said, we've launched the year with the Culture of Us, the US and PUSD, and we are really focusing on academic achievement in the area of literacy, every child reading by 3rd grade, math, all students proficient at their grade level, and college and career readiness, graduating ready for the world, ready for college.
Okay, I see Mr. Vieira nodding his head in agreement.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for allowing me to join you all tonight. Like my colleagues here, we are in our 3rd year of our strategic plan. We've got 5 focus areas, so we're continuing with those areas. First, it's really focusing on student learning, collaborating, or allowing our teachers and educators to collaborate. Secondly, it's safety and wellness. Supporting our students on campus and actually throughout the community is very important. Access and equity is huge. Like my colleague said, supporting these with our human and fiscal resources, and then finally communication and collaboration. And our catchphrase is one heart, every student opportunity ready, which means when they leave our district, they can do whatever they want because of the education they receive in our district. So those are our main impacts, our priorities for this school year, but it's continuing what we've done for the last many years.
All right, and we're thankful for you. We know you have a lot of work ahead of you. But let's dive right into our first topic this evening, and that is safety. It is a top priority for parents and administrators, whether it's stopping campus violence, preventing bullying, or making sure the students get to school safely. And of course, this topic is especially timely, unfortunately, in the wake of another school shooting in our country. 2 students, 2 teachers killed, 9 others injured in a shooting at a high school about 50 miles outside of Atlanta, Georgia. That happened yesterday. Appalachian High School in Winder went on lockdown and evacuated students to its football field before reuniting them with their families. The shooting suspect is a 14-year-old student who attended the school. Investigators say he is in custody and will be tried as an adult. Barrow County schools will be closed for the rest of the week. And I just want to add this breaking news. We just learned a couple of hours ago that the father of that young man, Mr. Gray, has been arrested on second-degree murder charges. So I'm sure that a lot of parents and teachers are having conversations with their students after this latest shooting. Are situations like these preventable? That's a general question. And what are we missing? Let's start with you.
So I do believe they are preventable, but we as superintendents, principals, teachers, support staff alone cannot do it. Let's begin with the most commonsensical action that has not been taken, which is regulating the access to guns in America. Just look at what happened this week. A 14-year-old has access to a gun purchased by an individual, happened to have been his father, and gifted to him.
Yeah.
Father admitting that there are many guns
In the home.
but they're not loaded, as if a 14-year-old who was gifted a gun does not learn how to load that weapon. The ease with which people have access to AR-15s, weapons of war, the ease with which individuals can access these tools of destruction with very little regulation needs to come to an end. So we need gun reform, in addition, yes, to what we already do, which is psychiatric social workers in school, counselors, technological tools that allow for the anonymous conveyance of information to prevent these incidents from happening, relying on information from students, also from the community. Peer counseling groups, de-escalation training for our workforce. But we can do all of that and create safe perimeters around school. If we do not address the issue of gun control, these catastrophes will continue to occur. So we need political courage, which unfortunately, considering the Sandy Hooks, the Parklands, as well as this most recent catastrophe, indicate there's very little of currently in the country. People to stand up to an industry that profits out of the blood of our kids.
And you know there will be parents and other administrators listening to this conversation saying, agreeing with you, Superintendent, I'm sure. In the meantime, until there is some kind of gun control or more gun control legislation, if that even happens, what can schools do? Some people even recommend metal detectors.
Well, probably the most important thing we can do is to have relationships between school staff and the students and families we serve. I mean, that is a critical element of creating safe schools, having those welcoming environments where students feel if they hear something, there's somebody who they have a connection with. It doesn't necessarily have to be a teacher or a counselor. It could be somebody in the office staff, the custodian at the school. It's building that strong school culture is essential to keeping the school safe. You're right, there's a lot of factors that we can't control, but we can control the relationships, creating welcoming environments for families.
I've heard that my daughter-in-law is an educator in Seattle, and the first thing she talked about was relationships, that students need to be seen, valued, and heard. And I think about that young man, Colin Gray, who is at the center of this recent controversy. I heard a student describe him as sitting in the back of the class alone every day. He obviously didn't have a relationship with anybody at the school, it seems like. And, you know, we know what happened at home with the giving the guns freely. Ms. Blanco, what do you think about that? What kind of resources do you think are necessary? Do you have enough?
We can always use more, but we have a wellness teacher in every school. Right now, we have wellness rooms. We have a whole launch where we have teachers connecting with our students and looking for students, like you mentioned, that don't have relationships with other students, and bringing them in and helping them, have friends. When we've been in these situations, we prioritize safety first at the incident, then help for the student, and then a long-term plan so that it doesn't happen again, right? You learn each time something like this happens. We've trained all of our staff in threat assessment, and we also have done 3 years of active shooting training with our staff, with the adults, not with the students, so that they're prepared in the event that we need to come up against something like this.
And I'm sure that's mandatory for all of the districts. Let me ask you this question then. How much of a role do you think social media has to play in school violence? You want to answer that question, Mr. Vieira, since we haven't?
I think it definitely has a role. I think my colleagues here have hit on all the key points. It's really, the mental health and the relationships piece. It's a physical site. It's also the communication. I think that gets into the social media. Also, and I'm sure everybody has, we have what we call care lines, and students can call in. We used to call it text to tip, but now they're allowed to call in for any type of situation or any concerns they may have. So students use that frequently. So I think that ongoing communication is essential. And of course, with the social media is there. Students use it for some positive things as well as some very negative things. I think also it's educating our students and families on the dangers of social media and the appropriate way to use it, and really helping them realize how much they're using social media and the impacts that it may have on them.
And that's okay. Let's open that up then. How do you get to parents? What do you hold a quarterly meeting with them to tell them, hey, you have to be careful, you have to help us or participate with us in trying to stop bullying on campus? Because as you said, Superintendent Carvalho, you're called on to do everything at this particular moment in time. Is there advice for students to stop campus bullying, campus violence? How much do you need to talk about it, I should say?
We certainly should not avoid it, right? And we create opportunities in school and through community-based organizations outside of school for kids to come together in circles of trust and open up about their feelings. I want to revisit, and we invest significantly in creating those settings. That's why, come on, as a nation, we need to get serious about investing in mental health experts, counselors, school psychologists, psychiatric social workers. Even though we make multi-million-dollar investments in these areas, the ratio of professional to student is still unacceptable, usually 1 to 500 across the state of California. Let me give another perspective on social media. Yes, there are certain benefits that you may get from information obtained through social media. However, let's recognize kids are addicted to social media. They are addicted to their phones. This has impacted their levels of anxiety, stress, suicidal ideation, obesity, depression, and it can all be tied to their addiction to social media. That is why in Los Angeles Unified, we've taken a bold step in banning phones during the school day. It is tough, it is controversial, but the research cannot be ignored. We go into a high school and we see 5 kids sitting around the same table during lunchtime. They're looking down, not interacting with their peers. And then we wonder why kids today behave in a way that is, quite frankly, harmful to self. So we need to, as adults, make these tough decisions to protect our kids. You cannot rely on the social media giants that develop algorithms to addict kids to the social media with deleterious impacts in terms of their mental well-being.
Well said. We're going to get more into that, especially on the cell phone issue. And I keep hearing community resources, which I think is a great thing. I even have possibly a suggestion that we can talk about when we get back to how we actually reach our children and let them have relationships. But we do have a question now for Superintendent Blanco from Tom J. from Pasadena. He wants to ask about campus safety, particularly at one of your elementary schools. Let's listen.
This is a safety question for Dr. Blanco from Pasadena. The walkway in this video was used by Field Elementary children for over 70 years until recently when PUSD inexplicably built metal bars across it to restrict access. Teachers are trained that in an active shooter situation, the first course of action is to run out of the building and far away until you're in a safe location. The metal bars installed by the district make running away impossible, and if an intruder enters the school, the students and teachers in this building are sitting ducks. PUSD claims that safety is their #1 priority, and multiple community members have brought this safety concern to your attention. Why do you refuse to address this situation and give the students of Field Elementary the best possible chance at survival?
Ms. Blanco?
Well, we have addressed the situation, and we do have routes that are non-public, because of obvious reasons. If there was an active shooter there, we would not want them to know our safety routes. And in fact, we closed the gate in the walkway so that people from the outside could not come in easily. We had some people that were in transition living in the walkway, and we got them help, and we wanted to keep our teachers and children safe, and that's why the walkway is closed.
Okay, you said people living in transition, homeless people?
Yes.
Or the
people-
unhoused?
Yes,
Okay.
unhoused.
Which we're going to talk about that as well. That's another topic that has to be discussed. Even children of the unhoused, that also has a lot to do with how they are being educated, how they're treated. But don't go away. We are not done yet, not by a long shot. Our Back to School Town Hall special continues after this break. Welcome back. Before the break, we were discussing school safety. Let's turn it over now to our next topic. As mentioned, mental health is a serious issue facing our young people. A recent CDC study revealed that slight improvements over time have happened, but their numbers are still troubling. 40% of high schoolers say they experienced persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness last year, compared to 2% in 2021. The numbers were higher for LGBTQ plus teens and teen girls, 65 and 53% respectively. As for younger kids, recent CDC numbers show 1 in 6 American kids ages 2 to 8 had a diagnosed mental, behavioral, or developmental disorder. So I want to ask all of you, have you seen changes in student behavior and mental health over the years, especially post-pandemic? Have you witnessed that?
Well, I would say the answer is definitely yes. Post-pandemic, we've seen students coming to us with a lot of issues, and you're right, then it's up to us to figure out what are the resources that we can provide in order to help those students. In Inglewood, for example, we have wellness centers. All of our schools have applied for California Community Schools grant to bring in mental health resources. We have volunteers, we have social worker interns working in our schools. We have folks coming in just to help students with some of the challenges that they're facing, because it's tough. Students have been through a lot, and it's up to us to provide the resources we can in conjunction with the communities that we work and live in.
I know you mentioned you have interns coming in, because I'm sure, funding is a problem. Budgets have been slashed, so that also makes a difference in who you can actually recruit, if you will, to come in and play those kinds of roles. But obviously very, very important. How has mental health affected their learning capability and actually growing developmentally? You see differences?
Yeah, bringing up the wellness centers, we also have wellness centers on each site, manned by, we have a social worker at each site. And it's really, and I'm sure everybody has this, we have MTSS teams, multi-tiered system of support at each of our school sites. And what that means is, for each student, we try to identify students based on data that we have, attendance data, behavior data, academic data, and we look at all the avenues of support that is needed. That goes to the social-emotional, the academic, the behavioral, sometimes family, and we try to build the support structures there, because as we know, students are not going to excel and succeed unless we've addressed all the issues. So I think it's a whole wraparound approach that we have to use when we're working with students who are having difficulties for a variety of reasons.
Do you have any advice? I'm wondering, with everything that you have to do, and so many students. How do you reach everybody? How do they know about it? You know, I mean, is there someone in particular or a group of people that goes around to each classroom and talks to the kids and say, hey, if you're having a problem, or we're here to talk to you, talk to your parents? It's hard enough, I would imagine, even to get parents fully involved, especially those that are working more than one job, even single parent households. And they may not have the time or the resources themselves to get as involved as they would like. Now, I know you go out into the communities because I've seen you go into homes and check on students, those who are truant.
We've knocked
That's
on
a lot.
34,000 doors. And the reason why we're knocking on doors is because we've identified these kids that were chronically absent. Number one reason why many kids do not go to school is because of depression, anxiety, stressors that have impacted them, social isolation, woes still as a result of the pandemic.
Right.
And, you know, it's not just me, it's an entire team. You know, we bring all the resources to the home to understand, number one, the root cause, and then provide direct resources at school, but also at home in partnership with community-based organizations. But look, like my colleague said, we have seen significant increases, unprecedented increases in mental health issues impacting our kids, I think still as a result of social isolation, but also their overdependence, which they learned even more during the pandemic on digital content and social media influences. You put all that together and kids are trying to decode a very complex world that does not match their chronological development, their mental development. So they are receiving inputs at a speed, at a pace, and a level of complexity that their brains are still not able to decode through, and it's causing them harm. That's why we need these psychiatric social workers. We too have wellness centers, but we need far beyond that, because after their 7 hours and 20 minutes in a protective environment of our schools, they go back.
Right.
And what happens when they are supervised or not, alone, particularly for the kid who is homeless, who is in foster care, that English language learner, that immigrant kid who fears tomorrow because of their parents' status in this country, that child who was abused, those kids are at such great risk, and they lead in every single statistic when it comes to mental health
development or problems. I keep hearing community-based coming up, and that almost seems like you can't do it without community-based support, which is also problematic when we just don't have as much. We don't have as much in the community like we used to. Remember, you could go after school or stay after school, and you can join the debate club, or you're going to make friends with some other something that you have interest in. But it's very difficult to find those kinds of things these days, especially in our lower socioeconomic communities.
Well, we're very fortunate at Pasadena that we can serve students before school and after school. A majority of our students stay with us up to 9 hours a day. And we do have relationship building time, homework time, nutrition time, and we really try to meet all of the students' basic needs. In addition to that, we do have 10 community schools where extra resources are there from the community. Our parent groups are also very active. They hold, trainings and sessions for parents to know where to go and get services for their students.
And do they come? Do they take advantage?
They do. I was at the AAPC, our African American Parent Council, this week. It was online, but it was a full house, and they really talked about the importance of rest and nutrition, and shared ideas on how to help students be successful at school.
So it sounds like you are addressing as best you can these mental health issues that have not gone away. We keep saying post-pandemic, which is very true. I know you have stats on that, and the fact that, let's face it, more kids do have more digital content as opposed to having that FaceTime with an adult, whether it's a parent or a teacher or even a friend, really. You know, so much time is spent on those devices. And I imagine getting a lot of information on those devices is not as helpful as we would like it to be. You talked about, you can go online and learn how to load a gun.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. The unrestricted access to good and bad information without the appropriate supervision is not good for kids.
There we go.
And right now there are insufficient controls to address that issue. Going back to your previous point and agreeing with my colleague, actually the state of California does a very good job at funding, creatively funding opportunities that allow for community-based organizations to come into our schools. So through ELOP, which is Extended Learning Opportunity funding, we can provide that before and after school enrichment, but also academic acceleration. We can use those funds even for weekend experiences, for winter break experiences, because we don't just teach kids. A lot of our kids, considering the level of poverty in our schools, depend on the breakfast, the lunch, and supper.
Right,
When we
right.
close schools, many kids go hungry. So we do have a good system that provides a continuity of support, particularly for the most fragile kids in our schools. But it's still not sufficient. We need more funding for more partnerships with organizations that actually are closer to where kids live. That continuity of support and
Vital.
learning needs to extend into every single street corner of every single neighborhood in Los Angeles.
Okay, well, we're talking about, we're trying to get some answers, and I appreciate you giving us all of this information. We do at least have some idea of what needs to happen and what can be done, and we're going to have more of our conversation when we come back. So please join us for our Back to School Town Hall special when we come back after this break. Welcome back. Before our next topic, we're actually getting a lot of comments on our Facebook page with concerns about kids during this heat wave. So, how are you keeping all your students cool? Because we've been talking off camera. It is hot and a heavy heat that we're feeling right now in Los Angeles. Are the kids staying cool?
Yeah, I think so. We've talked about our great team, and we're off air there for a second, and we all summer have tested air conditioning. We fortunately have air conditioning in all of our classrooms. And so things have been well in the classroom. I'm sure everybody has heard of, what is it, the wet bulb globe thermometer, which is what we're doing for outdoor activities. It's something that we're monitoring the heat level and the ozone, the air quality. And when it gets to a certain level, then we're not outside. Athletic teams are not outside, PE classes are not outside. So that in itself is almost a full-time job, but we're definitely monitoring because it's for the safety of our students.
Oh, for sure. And everybody, have you worked on this? Has this been like a year-long thing, or did you have models that said, yeah, it could get really hot at this time of year, so we need to have some of these things in place?
We have
So far,
contingency
so good.
plans for athletic activities, so knowing what the temperature is going to be like tomorrow, we already have plans to adjust, modify times of practice, also modify the setting for recess for younger kids, indoors or in the shade rather than outdoors. We too prepared for the opening of this school year by exhaustively, checking our HVAC systems, ensuring that they're all a go. But look, let's be very honest. 60% of our schools are 50 years old or older.
Yeah.
Over 100 are 100 years old. They need capital investment. They need investments into the infrastructure. And the state and the federal government do not provide funding for infrastructure. So we rely on community funds. We rely on general obligation investments supported by the people to ensure that the ACs work, to ensure that the roofs are okay, to ensure seismic resilience. This is a complex issue. So yeah, we're concerned. I'm not really worried about the conditions. Our teachers, our principals are trained, are making appropriate accommodations, shifting schedules, creating different settings for recess. It's a less than ideal situation, but we manage.
Okay, and it also shows what you're up against when you say you don't have state and federal funding for things like that. They need it. Okay.
We need it.
All right, well, let's move on to the COVID-19 pandemic. It led to an unprecedented time for our schools and communities. The closures in 2020 and 21 forced remote learning, intensified educational and socioeconomic disparities, and it affected student development. Nearly 4 years later, folks, where are we now? Are we still feeling the effects of the pandemic? Or have students caught up academically and socially?
I would say one of the most significant effects we're still dealing with is student in-seat attendance at schools, really bringing back that idea that it's important to be in school every single day. That's a big focus for us.
And you think part of that has to do with them not being able to be in school or not having to be in school from the pandemic?
Yeah, 5 years ago, Inglewood had 96% in-seat attendance rate. When we came back from the pandemic, it dropped to 87, 88 after the pandemic, and it's building that back up, building that culture of it's important to show up every single day.
I'll add that, the impact of the pandemic, when we knew so little about what was impacting our kids, the real threat to their health and well-being, as well as their parents, we took the necessary precautions. We now have learned that some of those actions that we took created other consequences. The social isolation, the loss of interaction with peers of equal age certainly has affected our kids. But the good news, so in terms of average daily attendance, we're back up to pre-pandemic levels. We went from a low of 80% when we came back, now to 93%. We opened this year with an average attendance of around 94 to 95%. So we're doing well.
Congratulations.
We reduced chronic absenteeism, which 2 years ago was at over 50%, down to around 30%, still too high, but we're leading other urban districts in the country in that regard. And one of the most important elements, every single grade level in reading and math based on the state's Smarter Balance Assessment, which is the state's exam, every single grade, reading and math, they're all up in terms of distance from standard improvement, as well as the percentage of students meeting and exceeding. Congratulations to our teachers and leaders, the support staff, because the district, for the very first time in many years, is showing positive improvement, academically speaking, outpacing the loss as a result of the pandemic. And where are we seeing those improvements? In the most fragile schools, at 2 to 3 times the pace of improvement as the district. These are schools with high poverty, high percentage of kids of color, English language learners, and students with disabilities. So that's exactly what we need to see that sustained reduction in the achievement gap that has persisted in this community and across the country.
Why do you think you're doing so much better?
There's a real focus on the part of our teachers and leaders. We modified the curricular offerings. We decided to create a new entity called the Education Transformation Office that caters to the 120 schools that, if you look back at decades worth of learning, these schools did not move. And these schools serve 40,000 kids. Those schools report directly to me, so I'm accountable. If those schools don't move, I need to be fired. And there is additional funding, additional monitoring, additional support, and additional accountability. Very streamlined professional development informed by the conditions in schools. The deployment of interventionists to reduce class sizes in reading and math. Actually negotiated reduction of class sizes over the past 4 years by 9 students per class across Los Angeles Unified, allowing more individualized and personalized attention given to kids. It's a combination of those elements. But the passion, the expertise of teachers and our support staff are the #1 reason why our kids are achieving.
Would you say, when we talk about the pandemic, how students were learning at home, and I think you said it best, Superintendent, when you said, some things that we put in place, we did a little too well, because that could be why some students did not return to class. But those students, I would say, are they homeschooled, or is there still a possibility of them learning remotely? Do you still have that in place?
So we have I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
We have a independent study school, but our attendance for that school has gone way down, and their students have returned to school for the most part. There are some special circumstances where students do need to be taught at home, medical reasons, other reasons that they can't attend. But in terms of recovery from the pandemic, we were very fortunate when the pandemic occurred that we had a one-to-one tech equity project already in place.
Wow.
So every student had a device to take home the day we closed schools.
Wow,
that made
remarkable.
a huge difference for us to have continuity
Sure.
in education, continuity in care. And I do think that our teachers were very proficient in teaching online because they had devices already in their classrooms that they were using. In terms of achievement, we are at pre-pandemic performance levels in elementary schools and reading and in math, and we're hopeful that our students are going to start exceeding those levels with the extra supports. Like Superintendent Carvalho said, we have changed curriculum. We've listened to the teachers. They've told us they need different tools for students to be successful. And so we have new curriculum in reading, math, and English language development this year.
That's Mr. Vieira. I see you nodding.
Yeah, no, I was thinking coming out of the pandemic, there were some positive aspects that came out. I think we've touched on a bit, and I think it did change how we looked at instruction in our schools. And I think we've better support students now. We do have students who, for various reasons, need different types of education. So I think that kind of was came out of COVID that way. And also, our instructors, they do a fantastic job. We had the same. We fortunately had a one-to-one initiative, so all of our students to this day still have access with a Chromebook or a hotspot. Everybody has access to the internet. And our teachers really evolved very quickly into a multifaceted instructional classroom. And so I think those are positive things that came out of it. And all these support structures we put in place were needed. And so I think it's something that our students need that we're carrying on, but it got initiated even faster because of the pandemic.
Yeah, okay, and we're going to talk more about technology before we end our discussion today. But we want to get another question in from one of our viewers, and this is for Mr. Morris. You recently announced the closure of 5 Inglewood USD schools, citing declining enrollment. So how is the district and how are community members dealing with the closures, and how will it affect class sizes?
Well, it's a great question, Pat, because you're right. We did announce the proposed closure of 5 schools in the district because of declining enrollment. The whole purpose of this school closure plan is to improve instruction and to improve school facilities, concentrate the resources we have on the buildings that will be open. As Superintendent Carvalho said, many of our schools in Inglewood are 50 to 100 years old. They haven't had the infrastructure maintained. Folks will look at a school and say, it's a beautiful school, but they haven't looked inside the walls to see the plumbing system, the electrical system, the fire alarm system. That's where the investments have to be made. We have to really concentrate the resources we have and provide the right number of buildings for the number of students we're serving. And so it's tough. It's tough. It's hard for a community. We're taking something away, a beloved institution where generations of families have attended. But it has to be done. It has to be done to keep the district financially stable and first and foremost, to provide the best instructional program we can for students.
And is that what they're receiving because of the diminished class size?
So one of the things that we can do, we eliminate combination classes, right? When we have the more concentrated groups of students, we have better professional development for our teachers, because now, guess what? I'm not the only kindergarten teacher at this school. Now there are 3 of us, and we can collaborate and work together. Plus, in addition to that, we'll have an opportunity to take the bond dollars that the community has generously passed, focus those resources on the buildings that are going to remain open so students have better facilities to attend. And guess what? We're going to fix the gas lines and the electrical and the plumbing, because we have a lot of those issues in the district that they have to be addressed.
All right, thank you for answering that question. And we now have a question for Superintendent Carvalho from Maria Luisa Palma from Los Angeles, and she wants to ask about test scores and equity within the district. Let's take a listen.
Superintendent Carvalho, although out here in the public, we can't yet review or verify the 2023 to 24 standardized test results, but you've told us repeatedly about the improvement you've seen across the board, yet we believe the achievement results are still too low overall. And given that many LA Unified parents, especially our immigrant communities, lack the information and the knowledge of the significance of low test scores and are often lulled into inflated assessments of their children's academic levels based on classroom grades of C's, B's, and A's. Parents don't know their children can't read or do basic math. How do you square this with your and the district's goals for social justice and equity? And what are you doing to eradicate this misinformation and ensure parents know their children's true academic levels?
So very good question. It's not our data. It's the state's data. So the state has not released to the public the district-to-district comparison. Not for me, not for any one of us. However, every single principal in our schools has data for their students, and we as a district possess the data. I cannot compare our data to the rest of the state or their districts. That's why the community does not yet see the state's published data. I'll take an opportunity to say that it is actually unacceptable that we already started the 24-25 school year and the state still has not released the data for the 23-24 school year. That's very unusual. I've communicated with state entities the fact that the data is released too late. The second point that Ms. Palma made is one dealing with teacher-assigned grades. That's not what I was referring to. I was referring to state assessment data, which is objective. It is performed and administered by the state. It is not done by the district. Thirdly, I do understand the concern. We are speaking about our data. I'm sure my colleagues have spoken about the data, but the state has not yet published the same data, but we have access to it. Soon enough, I've been told that as early, perhaps as sometime in September or October, the state data will be released to the community, which will reflect the data that we have been seeing all along. But this disconnect caused by a timing issue, meaning the data that we have accessible to us versus the release of the state's reports, does cause some degree of confusion in the community.
Are they aware of that? On the state level? Do they know that just to hold back information like that creates more problems for you, obviously?
I've had meaningful conversations with state officials regarding the tardiness with which the data is released. In a lot of states across the country, there are statutory requirements specific to the release of the data. Look, you should only assess to the extent that you will use that data to improve instruction for the following year. You should not assess for the sake of assessing. You're not going to assess your way to academic excellence. Great teaching does that. But to the extent that you assess, the data should be available much faster than it is. In a lot of districts across the country, the data for that school year is available before the school year is over so that the individuals who master schedule kids can appropriately place students into the right courses at the right level of rigor. So you can plan professional development. We have to do that with limited access to data. But the data we have is accurate, much like my colleagues, but it is not widely available to the public because the state has not yet released it.
So how do we tell Ms. Palma there that things are...
We know Ms. Palma rather well.
Okay.
She has access to data mining systems within the school system. We can also respond to any member of the community with specific data by school, by groups of schools, by regions, district-wide. We can disaggregate the data by racial, ethnic, linguistic subgroups, and that is currently available. What we do not have is the ability to compare to other districts or the state to determine, is our rate of growth par with the state? Have we fallen behind? Are we moving ahead faster, right? We can only look at our specific data.
Okay.
So I would like to also comment, I know that wasn't my parent, but we have to make sure that we don't reduce children to a single test score, right? There's many types of data that we look at. And the SBAC is our satellite data. It is about children, individual children, but it's a systems data that we can look and see what we need to do better, like new curriculum, the things we've talked about. Then there's diagnostic data, right, where we've seen some of our children grow 4 times as they were expected in a single year. And that's the data that our teachers really use to improve instruction and do individual learning plans. And then we have what we've recently learned a lot about that's called street data, where we go out and we talk to the students in our schools. We talk to our parents, our community, and our community members. And we've learned a lot through that. And I'll go on a limb and say that the SBAC is not a predictor of success in life. It is what we're held accountable for.
That's right.
Okay. And on that note, we're going to take a quick break and we will be right back. I think we were talking about that earlier. Welcome back. Technology in classrooms. It's a hot button issue on everyone's mind. It has helped advance our abilities and knowledge in many ways, but it can also be hurtful. So let's start with what everybody's been talking about lately, AI, artificial intelligence. We want to ask you, what are the pros and cons of AI for students?
Look, the pros is AI has the potential to crunch through a lot of data and simplify lesson planning, professional development opportunities, aggregation of resources, information for teachers. It can also do the same thing for students. The danger, manage it or it could manage you. Secondly, it could take away from the creativity and the natural process by which kids learn if they develop an over-dependency on something that's already been intellectually chewed up for them. That robs the magic of teaching. And then obviously, and you need to be ever so watchful over who's providing those services and how are they being provided. At the end of the day, nothing replaces the magic that a teacher brings to the classroom. That interactive social interaction between the teacher and students. The creativity, the creative thinking, the ability to work in diverse teams, the ability to engage in peer-to-peer communication. Artificial intelligence will never do that.
That makes me think of, I mean, this is hardly an example, but I just remember calculators. I remember we were able to use calculators in class. Said, oh, thank goodness, this is almost like cheating. But AI is something just totally new, different, but as you mentioned, Superintendent, it does, in some ways, it does take away the ability even to learn or to process, because it's just there for you. And it sort of takes whatever thought process you have and just, mixing it up and puts it on paper, and you go, yeah, okay, that's how I feel. That's the answer.
True.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to move on from that. That's our question for AI. We've saw that. It's good and it's not so good. So let's go to cell phones. And this is something that Superintendent Carvalho can certainly speak on, because LAUSD is going to is banning cell phones for the school day?
For the school day, not just during class time. That's already our policy. But that policy relies too much on the policing done by teachers or principals. So what the board adopted was a resolution that bans the use of cell phone during the entire school day.
Is that even during recess?
Even during recess.
Wow. Okay.
During nutrition. And there's a reason why. Kids stopped interacting as kids. They lack in the social interaction they should have with peers of their age. They are distracted in the classroom. Teachers always having to admonish them to put their phones away. The buzzing, the dinging that the phone does because it's receiving messages is distracting the child and distracting other children and the teacher. But the main reason is the scientifically proven connection between mental stressors and the addiction to cell phones and the content that students access through the cell phones. So this resolution that the board adopted prohibits the use of cell phones during the school day, but also empowers me as superintendent to pursue the possibility of legal action against social media giants who we believe are responsible for algorithms that learn the child, entice the child, addict the child to their digital content, and has created significant mental health concerns with those same children, putting us in a position of having to spend millions of dollars in addressing those issues that our kids are experiencing and are demonstrating. Somebody needs to be held to account.
I was going to say, it sounds like you're ready to go to Congress and testify.
I will do whatever it takes, because I think that the reality can no longer be ignored. And I know social media CEOs platform CEOs have gone to Congress.
Yeah.
They have the resources that we don't, in terms of empowering themselves with a cloak of legal protections. But at the end of the day, not much has changed in terms of vulnerability of our kids to the intent of these social media platforms.
Well, how do all of the rest of you feel about a ban? And would you be joining in this effort?
We actually, a few years ago, we piloted it. We're a 7 through 12 district. And so our junior high, we had one junior high pilot, the no cell phone policy on a school site, and it's now expanded. So for the last 3 years, we've had a no cell phone policy at all of our junior high schools, and largely it's gone very well. I think to the Superintendent Carvalho's point, it's students are more engaged with each other and more socially active, more engaged in classrooms. We're right now piloting at one of our high schools. Obviously, high schools, older students, much larger, so we're piloting it just out of the classroom. No cell phones in the classroom. We've had teachers do it individually, but now at a site level, we're doing it across the board. So we'll see how that goes. But with our junior highs, that has been the case for the last few years.
Have you had a lot of pushback?
You know, not really, believe it or not. There were some concerns initially with parents who, obviously, safety reasons, want to know where their students are. They got to school, where they're going after school. Some students have medical reasons for having their cell phone, but these are all common sense types of dilemmas that were always worked out. And once parents realize that we're not saying you can't bring a phone to school, we're just saying it's got to be in a way and silenced or off during the school day. We really had a lot of positive feedback on that.
Yeah. You need to define the exceptions. So
Sure.
kids who may be insulin dependent and they use their phones for constant reading, right? Or other conditions. Students who may rely on the cell phone for immediate translation, kids who don't speak English, for example. There are manageable exceptions that we need to consider. Where we are right now is we have an additional 2 months of conversations with stakeholders, researchers, teachers, parents, students themselves, support personnel, on how to fashion the best possible policy to be implemented in January of 2025. And that will include very clear information, protocols on the use of the phones or access to the phones during times of emergency, even though a lot of law enforcement experts tell us that having 300, 400, 500 students sending different messages during a time of emergency may actually cause confusion with first responders. So we are navigating that process to ensure that we have the best possible policy that separates the kids from the phone, but still allows those who need the phone for reasons of health or educational purpose, but also protocols on access to these resources during times of emergency.
You know, that's what most parents would say. They would want their kids to have access to a phone because of an emergency. Like, let's say what happened in Georgia yesterday, but to hear the fact that all of those students on a phone at the same time could cause some confusion in actually, you know, being able to get the kids to safety. That's a good argument, certainly.
One coming from, you know, the voice of safety and security experts.
Are you going to? Oh, yes,
I think
Mr. Morris.
though I think the overriding theme you've heard is technology can be our friend. There are some incredible uses, whether it's artificial intelligence or cell phones or computers in the classroom. But there is nothing like the joy. I was in a third grade classroom today, and the joy on these children's faces as they're working together with their teacher to count syllables in words, the magic that happens between teachers and students, that's probably the most valuable part of the educational system. And so, yeah, technology can support that, but what I worry about and celebrate every day is kind of that magic that happens in classrooms.
And that's how children learn to socialize, right? Talk to each other as opposed to talking to a phone. I bet you almost feel the same way about cursive writing. I know I do. What, you're not studying that? You don't know how to write cursive? Oh my goodness. Okay, well, we're having a very enjoyable discussion here, and we're talking about some very serious issues that we hope that you are gleaning some facts from our conversation, and we're giving you some advice. Welcome back. We were talking about cell phones being taken away from students. I shouldn't say taken away, but yeah, not allowed in the classrooms for the school day. And Ms. Blanco, we wanted to get your response to that for Pasadena.
So we're working on enforcing the policy that we currently have, that it is for instructional use only. But I do appreciate what everyone else has said, and we do want to have further conversations. And I was glad to hear that there will be exceptions, you know, for the reasons that were stated for translation and medication and other ways. And as I've been going around and visiting the schools, I've been hearing the reminders that that's not instruction, put it away, more than in the past. So I think we're getting a really good equity of the use of them this year, and we're going to start the conversation with our community partners soon.
Okay, very good. And it all seems like a very common sense approach, actually, you know, when you look at it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk about a crisis that we are all very familiar with here, especially in Southern California. It's taking a toll on LA County, and that, of course, is the issue of homelessness. Student homelessness has taken a turn for the worse in recent years. There were more than 15,000 unhoused students in LA County just last year, and that's up 5,000 from the 2020 to 2021 school year. And we're going to begin with Superintendent Carvalho because this issue unfortunately affects LAUSD the most. What is fueling the numbers, and what resources are available for students and families that are unhoused?
You know, what's fueling the crisis that we're seeing, and you're right, we've seen a staggering increase in the number of youth experiencing homelessness from 2 years ago to last year, and unfortunately I expect that to continue to increase this year. The reasons are well known to us: socioeconomic conditions, unaffordability of housing, many families whose parents or caretakers are not being able to keep up with inflation and the cost of living locally, newly arrived international students with families who are not able to quickly secure stable housing. I have visited homeless shelters where I met individuals from Venezuela, from Ukraine, from Russia, from Central South America.
From Gaza, maybe?
Yes, many
These war zones.
arriving last year from Afghanistan. We expect individuals will be coming from the Middle East now. And in many instances, you know, before they are able to find some degree of housing stability, they live in shelters. We respond quickly in collaboration with county and city entities. Every time a family is in distress, we have found families living in cars, in vans, and sometimes even in tents. Very, very quickly, we provide accommodations for those individuals. We provide them with resources, with all the supplies they need. We try to assist the family with more stable conditions for themselves and the children. Kudos to Mayor Bass. She's been able to, through her efforts, to reduce homelessness within the city. But we continue to see an increase in homeless students, but they are not living on the streets. They are classified as homeless because of the conditions their parents are experiencing, mainly living in shelters or living in someone's garage. We have an office that is solely dedicated to supporting these students. They have special graduations. We have clothing for them. We have the toiletries they need. We have special counselors that address the child and the families, never revealing the condition of the child to their students, but we attempt to stabilize the living conditions and the schooling conditions for those students. In addition to that, regardless of where the child and the parents may live, we at a premium provide transportation to the child to ensure that the social network around the child is maintained.
Tell me about the special graduations really quickly.
Yeah, so obviously a lot of these homeless kids don't have the money to buy the tuxedo, to buy the dress. So we actually have a special event for them where they go and shop for free for everything they need. And then we pay out of our foundation, we pay for all the costs for them to attend graduation ceremonies, celebrations, in addition to those milestone moments that kids will forever remember. Because you're homeless, you should not be deprived. You should not stop enjoying those. Okay, look, I was homeless. I lived under the bridge when I was a teenager.
Did you, Superintendent?
Yeah, I will never, and it is well known amongst our community of educators. I will never forget what that was like. I cannot believe that 40 years later, we actually have a higher number of kids experiencing what I experienced 4 decades ago. Shame on us for not reacting in a more determined, courageous, and quicker way to the crisis that we are seeing unfolding before our very own eyes.
Let us know how we can help.
Thank you.
I've said that on the air, even personally. Let us know. Okay, before I get too emotional, I want to hear from Superintendents Vieira, Blanco, and County Administrator Morris. How big of an issue is homelessness in your districts, and what efforts do you have in place to help students?
Yeah, I mean, it's growing in our district too. The majority of our homeless students are doubled up with other families in homes. That's primarily, but same issues that are approaching them. Again, through our social workers that we have on each site and using our community resources, same thing, because it's hard to study for a test or go to class if you're worried about clothing and food and all those types of things. So same type of thing, wraparound services, ensuring the families has the food they need, the clothing they need, housing, transportation, and support. I mentioned before with technology, making sure there is technology to do a lot of the work now is technology-based, hotspots, so really that whole wraparound service so that they're able to have the basic needs of their life and then also succeed in school, because that's what's going to get them out of that condition.
Ms. Blanco.
It is a growing problem in our community. Particularly, it's an expensive community to live in, and we have an office dedicated to supporting the families. At every school, we have a community liaison, and at our 10 community schools, we also have a community advocate and resources. We too do have special proms, special ways that our community comes around our students that are immigrants as well as in families in transition, so that they can enjoy the same activities that their peers do without being embarrassed and have the same opportunities.
Mr. Morris.
Yeah, and the only thing I can add, because I think what you heard is this theme. This is one of those areas where we get by with help from our friends, and there's a plethora of community resources and groups that want to come in and help to serve these students. Local educational foundations and folks in the community. So when we have a student that needs a haircut, we've got a place for them to go. So it really is having the people at the school who are sensitive, who know who the students are, and then know how to do that outreach to provide the support to the families.
And every student should have a picture in the yearbook.
2 quick points, and they do, and they do. 2 quick points. Number one, we're not just providing services to the kids based on their need, we're actually pursuing solutions for the entire community. That's why this past year, we opened a building with 26 units for families whose children attend LUSD and were experiencing homelessness. In addition to that, we just released an RFI, a request for information, making available about 10 different sites on our properties where housing could be built in partnership with private sector entities as well as the city. So we need to be in a position as superintendents of not only providing educational support, social emotional support, but also being partners in larger scale solutions for the crisis before us. And I can tell you that in our mayor, we have someone that envisions these different governmental organizations working not in silo but in partnership to deliver these services. And I'll take advantage of this opportunity also to say, whether it's student homelessness or the shutting down of the Department of Education, the Department of Education is the entity nationally that actually protects homeless students. It's the entity that actually assures that the Vento-McKinney policy that protects homeless kids is enforced. It is the entity that funds poor kids and students with disabilities.
So if it's no longer there, then what happens?
Who will be watching? Who will be protecting and monitoring?
I want to thank you so much for coming in and sharing all of the information that you have. And I think it's really been an eye-opener for anybody who's watching and listening, and of course this will play again, as to just how much you have to deal with. Just not just improvements, but on education, but on the lives of students and really their families. It's really more than getting an education. It's certainly a lot more than academics, even though that is top of your priority, of course. So thanks again for sharing.
Thank you.
And we hope that you'll come back, okay?
Often.
And we want to thank you for watching our Back to School Town Hall special. We hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Be sure to join us again on September 19th for our second Town Hall special with district leaders from Orange, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties. In the meantime, have a good night, everyone.